Halt, who goes there? It's Professor Rosenlot. Hope you're doing well. Hey, they all can't be winners, right? Um, this is the most annoying thing in the world, this helmet. Anyway, hope you're hanging in there. Hope you're enjoying the warm weather. Maybe it's a little too warm. And you're hanging out okay. And I know that I just want to let you know that I am constantly reminded that these aren't normal times, and for various reasons. And I know we're all going through a lot, but you know, the way to think of this course is a way to escape the monotony and kind of distract yourself and maybe pretend that we're knights just for one day, and just try to engage in the material and get interested in it and wonder about nature a little bit. And to remember that, you know, doing something intellectual is a really nice way to distract yourself from everything that's going on. So without further ado, let's get rid of the silliness. We'll stay with the castle, I think, but we can go back to the normal Rosenbloom here. There we are. All right. Oh, here come all the questions. Our captain. Okay, well, it's kind of a pirate sound, but that's fine. I'm sure knights use pirate sounds as well. Somebody asked, should we read chapter 3? You know, okay. Here's a college lesson for all you folks. You know, very often professors aren't going to tell you you need to read certain chapters by certain times, because they assume at this point that you're going to be able to kind of figure it out based on you know, what the topics in class are, what the topics in discussion are. And you can also go to your syllabus, and you can see that, you know, depending on the topic we're talking about in a given week, there'll be a chapter that's associated with it. And so, you know, again, you don't need to read the chapters before you get here. In fact, if I were taking this class, I do really well. No, but if I were taking this class, I would probably come to the lecture and not necessarily read the chapter. And then after I was in lecture, I'd go back to the readings and maybe back to the video and kind of fill in the notes. So it might actually make sense for you to come to the lecture and then go ahead and read the chapter that's relevant to the lecture after the case. Okay, so, you know, it's up to you when you want to read, but it should be pretty clear what's going on. Certainly before the first test, I will absolutely inform you what chapters you'll be responsible for. And if we can speed up a tiny bit, then that will help us get through all this stuff. Okay. You know, okay, some of these things I'm not going to go back and re-explain, so there's nothing we need to know specifically from the reading right. We'll talk about that as the test comes on. Is there some way we can access the PowerPoint you show us? Yeah, I think the PowerPoint slides are pretty much as is so far on the iLearn site. So, oh boy, hopefully that will be okay. You know, somebody asked about binaural information. I talked about it last week, and your discussion sections talked about it, and the book talks about it. So I would rather not go through the information that I've already presented. I know I do want input. I want people to, you know, come up with insights and stuff like that. But since we are recording, I think it's okay for you to go ahead and look for the information you might have missed first on the recording, and then your TAs or myself can help you. Okay, I don't want to discourage the questions and stuff like that, but I think we need to kind of get through the material. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's continue talking about reflected sound. And just so we all know, just so we all know where we are here. We are going to finish our discussion of reflected sound today, and then we're going to get into emitted sounds, including some really great examples that I think you'll really enjoy. And then we got to kind of, you know, really push ourselves a little bit today, and so we can get to smell very soon. In fact, in discussion section, you'll be doing smell for your next sections, whether they're on Friday or Monday. Okay, so we're gonna push it a little bit. The big picture. So what we've been learning, besides, you know, the original introduction to reflected sound through the echolocation we all discussed, we also learned that reflected sound is something that we are all sensitive to. It's one of our perceptual superpowers that we don't really have conscious awareness of. And we discussed this in the context of sound engineers and sound designers for television and movies. And there's some great examples there. And we had some lessons that we learned, and you can look back on the slides or the previous lectures. But just generally, I think, if I remember them correctly, we can recognize the type of room we're in based on how they reflect sounds. We can recognize where we are in the room, depending on how different parts of rooms reflect sounds. And we can recognize how sounds are obstructed or blocked by things that we can actually then perceive properties of. Things that aren't making sound but are blocking sounds. We can tell their location, their size, and even their shape in some cases. And these are lessons both from the sound engineers, the sound designers, and some lab work I discussed with you as well. Okay, the last lesson about reflected sound I want to talk about is kind of something that's kind of overarching to all these things, and that is you folks, your generation is more sensitive to this than probably my generation is. And it has a lot to do with the quality of reproduction, what these engineers and sound designers are able to do to reproduce this. And you're listening very often over headphones or surround sound speakers. Certainly, even with if you have a flat screen TV and you have speakers in the flat screen TV, that is so much better sound than what I grew up with TV, where the speaker took up a lot more room, but it didn't provide nearly as clear or spatially kind of rich sound that you guys are all getting. So I asked everybody that I interviewed with regard to this stuff, is it the fact that this is just something you're doing for each other, you're trying to impress each other with how accurate you're reproducing the room acoustics? And they said, no, in fact, we have to kind of continually get better because people are getting more and more experience with listening. And I just wanted to kind of give you a little anecdote about that. If you went through the book chapter, you might remember this. I interviewed this terrific guy named, where is going on here? Yep. Yeah, there he is, Zoli Asaze. And Zoli, actually, he worked, I don't know if that show's still on, and maybe there's some fans in the class that show is called Days of Our Lives. When I interviewed him, it was the oldest soap opera that was still on TV. I mean, it was the show had been on 50 years or something like that. Soap operas are interesting. People are absolutely, the fans are absolutely devoted to these shows, but they're done very cheaply. And if you've ever seen a soap opera, it's sort of those afternoon shows. I don't know if there's a whole bunch of them on anymore, but you can tell they're done, with kind of, I don't know, low cost sets and stuff like that. So Zoli, unlike the division of labor between Jay Patterson and Sandy Berman, Zoli was responsible for everything having to do with the show. He's the sound mixer, the sound designer. He adds the sound effects and all that stuff. Basically, he does everything except the music. And he told me this great story about how important these things are. So I guess if you know the show, maybe you know this. There's a main character named Bo, and a lot of the scenes in the show took place in his apartment. With his, I don't know if it was with his wife or a girlfriend or the girlfriend's evil twin or whatever whatever that the show is involved. But he said that something really interesting happened about 5 years before we interviewed. He said that they installed these kind of cameras that I believe now a lot of shows use, a lot of kind of live taping shows use. And certainly I know that like news shows, like CNN shows do this, where the cameras aren't actually controlled by a cameraman behind the camera kind of moving it around. Instead, the cameras are kind of on these, I guess, belts or tracks, and they are completely controlled from within the studio where the director sits and all that stuff. And so the whole thing is remote controlled. The cameras can kind of slide back and forth and go up and down and stuff like that. And in order to make room for that giant apparatus in Bo's apartment, what they needed to do was kind of reorganize where they had put the sound baffles, right? So, we talked about how Jay Patterson has to put baffles in the set so it sounds like the room that you're looking at. For the first time, Zoli said, in something like 25 years, or since they originally had designed this old set, they had to move these sound baffles around. So here we got a little of this on the slide here. Yeah. So they changed the baffles in Beau's apartment. And, they didn't think that it would make too much of a difference. Zoli said he heard a little bit of a difference. But he said, like, the week after they did that, after they changed the baffles, it's kind of a charming story. He got hundreds, the show got hundreds of handwritten letters, probably from older women who are kind of the demographic that watch these shows very often. My grandmother loved this show, for example. He got these handwritten letters in 2006, 2007, saying something's different about Beau's apartment. There's something wrong with it. I don't know if you changed the color of the set or made it larger or something like that, but it just doesn't seem right. Can you please change it back? And he thought, oh my gosh, the only thing that was changed were these baffles, these sound baffles. Nothing in the appearance of the set was changed, and the cameras were generally at the same positions they always were. They were just now on tracks, and that's why they had to change the baffles. But the sound did change a little bit. And so after he got all these letters, he had to go back in and try to kind of position the baffles so they were still out of the way of the cameras, but they, made Beau's apartment sound like it used to sound. And he said that he would listen to old recordings of dialogue in the apartment, and then have people speak in the kind of redesigned, and he had to go back and forth until he feels like he got it right. But it's so interesting because these are people who aren't necessarily listening over the highest quality systems, but because they've been listening for so long, they gained a certain expertise with the reflected sound as it was portrayed on the show, and they could hear the difference. Okay? But as I said, you folks you don't need that sort of, 20, 30-year experience with a TV show to pick out little differences, even if you're unaware that they are based in sound and not something else. Okay? And this is, according to everyone I talked to, all these folks, is really based on these improvements in movie and home theater sound and music recording. Even if MP3s aren't as warm sounding as LPs, which is what I grew up with, and I can't really hear the difference. But you probably have friends, or maybe some of you prefer LP sound, vinyl sound over MP3s. MP3s are still pretty vivid, and in some ways might capture the spatial aspects of sound. So that's music recording, but certainly when you're watching TV, when you're watching movies, whether it's in the theater or at home, the sound is really, really good, making your generation very sensitive to these things. Which brings me to the last person I wanted to talk about that's going to shed some light on this idea of reflected sound. I think you're going to find this really, really interesting. I interviewed a gentleman named Yasuhisa Toyota, and there he is on the left, the smiling bald man with the glasses. Real nice guy. He is probably the most famous concert hall designer in the world now. When I interviewed him, he was just kind of heading up the hill and becoming one of the most famous because he designed the interior of the Disney Hall. Okay, so maybe you folks haven't had a chance to go to Disney Hall, but you know where it is, right? It's downtown. You can see he's standing outside there. It's got, from the outside, it's got this really unique kind of architectural shape to it. It's become one of kind of Los Angeles's, kind of architectural icons. So you can get postcards with this on it. But he wasn't responsible for the outside. He was responsible for the inside. And he had gotten hired, I believe, because he had had so much success designing other interiors of concert halls, including, talk about iconic architecture. If you look up Sydney, Australia, you'll probably see a picture of the opera hall, the opera site there, which kind of looks like kind of embedded shells, kind of like waves or something like that. He redesigned the interior there. He redesigned the interior of a number of well-known New York City concert halls, and he devised a really interesting technique in doing so. So I'll get to that in a second. Well, I think I have a picture here to give you a sense of what this is like. Do I? Yeah, there it is. Okay. Let's just look at the picture. Don't write anything down yet. We'll get to these things. But you'll see that is the interior of the Disney Hall. Hopefully some of you folks have been there. If you haven't, I recommend you go before you leave Southern California, or go when you have a chance. It is spectacular. And it is, I would say, some of the clearest sounding music you'll ever hear live. Okay, so let's talk about this. I asked him, so why have you decided to use a special sort of design when it comes to the new concert halls you're designing? And he told me, he said, well, these days, architectural acousticians, which is what he is, they have to replicate not just nice sounding music. They're competing against CD quality. As we were talking then, it was CD quality. Of course, now it's MP3 quality. And so it ends up being very, very clear. And the other thing that he's has to deal with is the fact that people are used to listening to music now where the microphones are placed very close to the instrument. So I can tell you, my dad was a huge classical music aficionado, and he used to play me all these records, and he used to he was kind of interested in sounds, and so we would talk about how orchestras were recorded. And in the old days, they did a great job. They did really well, but with limited resources, what they would do is they'd go into the middle of the amphitheater and kind of across from the stage and hang two microphones down that were then angled toward the orchestra. And that's how the orchestra was recorded. And nicely, what it would do is it would get the orchestra, but it would also get something of the acoustics of the hall that the orchestra was recorded in. They still do that, but they have now added specific microphones for every single instrument. The first violin, the second violin, all the way through. Every instrument, typically, in an orchestra now, when it's recorded for an MP3 or something like that, has its own microphone, in addition to those that are hanging down. And he says what that does when people listen to music now, especially classical music, but also pop, rock stuff, the audience hears each instrument with exceptional clarity. Exceptional clarity and intimacy. And I'll talk about those two terms in just a second, but it is like it sounds. You can hear each instrument much more clearly than you ever could. And it sounds like the instrument is very close to you, okay, as if you're sitting next to the first violin. And he says that he needs to replicate that in the concert hall, which is not a normal place to do that. And in the concert hall, it's rare that they will use microphones for anything like that. He needs to design the acoustics, okay, so that it sounds like you're close to the instruments and each instrument is equally clear, that you can clearly hear the instruments, which led him to kind of devising this interior design. So this is, in fact, the inside of the Disney Hall. And if you looked at pictures of the inside of the Sydney Opera House, and I just read something. He had just designed another theater, and I'll have to look that up. I can't remember, but it was in the New York Times. He has applied this to pretty much every new major concert venue, classical music concert venue or opera venue in the world. If not him doing it, some of his kind of students have been doing it, and it works exceptionally well. And so, if you've seen concert halls before, and you've gone to concerts like in stadium and stuff like that, they don't look like this, right? The band's up there, and then the seats kind of maybe fan out, and there isn't a whole lot of kind of thought put in very much to the the design of rock or pop concerts or something like that. But for classical music especially, this works great because what it does, the orchestra is, in fact, right here. They sit down here kind of, forward in the theater. There are seats back here, but most of the seats kind of face the orchestra. But they are severely tiered. And what I mean by tiered is they kind of come at an angle, right? And they kind of are separated by these walls. So if you can look on the slide now, I'm pointing to there's a seating area here, and then there's one below it, one below it. And that's exactly what happens down closer. And the orchestra's here, and the same thing happens behind and all that. And that's why it's called a vineyard design, right? So if you've gone to Napa or what is it, Paso Robles or whatever, and been to vineyards, you know that very often the vines are grown on hills where there's kind of little kind of leveled areas for the vines to kind of be stabilized. So it kind of looks like a vineyard, the interior of this. What it does is it allows the audience members to be very close to the orchestra, much more so than if things were on a less kind of steep slope, because then you'd have to pull the audience further back. But when it's like this, okay, what it does is it allows even people up here to be closer to the orchestra than they would without that slope. That's the first thing, okay? The other thing is there are strategically placed walls around the seating areas. And this kind of shows it. Well, you can see these little walls that are kind of situated between the rows here of seats, but there's also big walls to the side, and they divide up the seats all the way through. And what that does is it allows the sounds to kind of come out and bounce around the walls a little bit, but just enough so everybody gets a nice kind of intimate experience with the instruments. And so what it does, and this is why he's chosen this sort of technique, it provides exceptional clarity, exceptional intimacy. When you're sitting there in the audience, you can hear everything so clearly. Say, okay, I know this piece, and one of the parts I love most about this piece is what the oboe does here. So I'll concentrate on the oboe. And then what I like about the next part of the piece is what the violas do. And then you can concentrate. And when you do that, you can easily pick out the instruments without a problem. And the other thing is, and this is almost spooky. So I think this is the reason you really want to go, even if you're not a huge classical music fan. It sounds like the instruments are right there next to you. It sounds like you are sitting in the middle of the orchestra. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the orchestra around you, and you feel like you can almost touch a violin and touch the trumpet and the oboe and all that sort of thing. And that is not a function of miking the instruments or anything like that. That is just a function of how he's designed this theater. It's just amazing. It's fabulous. So when the theater opened up, it was a huge success at the Disney Hall in downtown Los Angeles. It was a huge success. But if there was a criticism, it was interesting. They said that you not only feel so close to the instruments and so close to the orchestra members when you're listening, you kind of feel close to other people in the audience who might be making sound. So if there's a particularly quiet part, quiet passage in a piece, if someone's coughing, on the other side of the theater, it sounds like you're sitting next to them. And they realize that this could be a problem. We do want them to feel an intimacy and a clarity with the orchestra. We do not want them to feel that way with people coughing around the theater. So they did do a little, he went back and he did a little bit of a modification to help with that. But, I went after that modification, and you can be a little distracted when you're hearing people coughing or maybe, making noise with the program pages or something like that. You can hear everything very clearly and intimately. So what they've done now during the flu and cold season, normal flu and cold seasons, obviously not what we're dealing with now, is what they would do is they'd put big bins of cough lozenges. You know what that is? They're you know, like little things that are, you know, wrapped, and you put them in your mouth, and it kind of suppresses your cough. You say, if you have a cough, please take these, take a handful, and if you feel a cough coming on, please, you know, suck on these, and that will keep you from being distracting to the rest of the audience. And it does work, except when I was there, what was distracting is hearing everybody kind of unwrapping their little lozenge so they could put it in their mouth. So they weren't coughing, but like that. So it takes a while to get used to, and it only was a real problem during the quiet passages. It wasn't a problem during most of the regular orchestra performance. So it's just a fabulous sort of experience to have. I really recommend it. But the big lesson here is that everything I've been talking about with regard to what Hollywood needs to do, or architectural acousticians like Yasuhisa Toyota needs to do, is kind of, you know, it's more of a challenge than it used to be, because you folks, especially, are so kind of sophisticated with spatial sound. Even if, again, we're talking, this is kind of one of the big themes in the course, you may not be aware of that. Very likely you're not aware of how sensitive you are to spatial sound until you took this class. But if you feel yourself being distracted, if you feel yourself less engaged, as the movie and TV folks would say, if you're distracted in the theater or in a concert hall like this, it could be that there's something missing in this replication, in the kind of creating of the spatial sound, so it matches what you're seeing. Okay. Good. This is we'll take a tiny little break here. I don't want to actually do a, I guess I could do a question here if you want, but let's see what your questions are first. All right. Yeah. So Edgar asks, is this like footsteps in a video game? I think so. I think we talked a little bit about the importance of footsteps and replicating or simulating real footsteps for the Foley artist, right? Footsteps are a type of sound your brain is really, really tuned to. And if footsteps don't sound real, and if they especially don't make the room, you know, with all its reflections sound real, you can be very distracted. Oh, Amy's been to Disney Hall. With your orchestra, you watched an orchestra practice and they sounded amazing. And there was also interesting to see the architecture of the room. Yeah, it's a very striking looking interior too, Amy. I'm sure you'll agree. Where it's you know, mostly wood, and it's just very beautiful. I mean, you know, you as students can get really, you know, a discount, really nice discounts on tickets. They have really great. They want you folks to be exposed to this and you know, you learn a little bit about classical music and all that. They love when young people are there. In fact, you know, we used to bring my kids to kids concerts that were, I think, completely free, if I remember correctly, because they want to make sure that, you know, people kind of continue enjoying this sort of experience. So if you have a chance after everything's better, we're all healed, please try to go. Okay, how about Edgar asked about 3D sound. It depends on the type of 3D sound we're talking about. You know, some companies, they discuss 3D sound and are doing something more like surround sound. I think the best 3D sound is, in fact, the binaural recording sort of situation we talked about in the discussion section. I talked a little bit about last week. So I think that's probably the closest thing to true 3D sound, because you're capturing sound from all around. It's being structured also by the little ear flaps, and we know that's an important thing for having not just left-right separation, but front, back, and top, bottom. Are theaters designed to trap sound? Asked Alondra. And yes, the answer here is yes. Theaters are designed to allow for the replication of sound. You know, I think most theaters these days, not just the expensive ones, but most theaters have speakers, sets of speakers that go not just in front behind the screen, but also all the way down the sides and in back. And in order for that to be an effective way to listen, they have to have all the right kind of acoustic baffling in the walls and ceilings and all that sort of stuff. I have to say, just very quickly, I remember the first time they really were pushing that. George Lucas used it for the second Star Wars movie I saw, which was The Empire Strikes Back. And there were scenes where things were flying over your head. And I remember vividly how it really did sound like it was flying, something was flying over your head going from the back of the theater to the front of the theater. And I don't think anybody in the theater had ever heard that before. And so you heard like this gasp, like, like that. You guys are all used to it. You're all jaded. But boy, when you first hear that, it's a visceral reaction. I mean, I remember getting chills during The Empire Strikes Back. Okay, would it be confusing to echo? Yes, that's a great question, Tiffany. Yes, I think it would be confusing. So if Daniel Kish came into the theater, he'd probably, first of all, he's a very, he loves classical music. I'm sure he's been to the Disney theater. I should contact him and ask him what his experience is. He would love how vivid the orchestra sounds. But if he had to kind of navigate, especially probably on the floor, oh boy, shoot. Okay, hopefully I'm coming through okay. I just got a quick message that my internet connection isn't great. Hopefully I'm coming through. I know I'm being recorded, if nothing else. Anyway, he might have a lot of difficulty getting used to echolocating so he can navigate around. I would not be surprised. Okay, are you guys seeing me okay and hearing me okay now? Not sure why there's a connection problem here. I keep freezing, is that right? Have I been, I'm not getting any messages now, but am I okay? Could you let me know? I'm okay. Okay. Again, I apologize for this. I don't know what's going on today. My connection seems okay. Thank you. If it happens again or I lose the connection, we might all have to go back and sign in, but let's hope that doesn't happen. Regardless, this is being recorded and the freezing is not recorded. The recording is happening right on my computer, so it should be fine. Okay, let's go ahead and do a polling question. What the heck? And, oh man, let's see here. Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? Okay, good. I'm gonna give you a question that is in the last slide, so I just moved the slide. Don't worry what's here. I'm not gonna be using the slide you're currently seeing, but what I want to do is ask you a question without showing you the slide because it is based on that slide. Okay, here's the question. Which of the following characteristics are considered most important in modern concert halls? 1, sound clarity. 2, sound intimacy. 3, sound histocompatibility. And 4, both A and B. If you don't know what histocompatibility is, that's okay. All right, I think you'll get this without a problem. Oh yeah. All right. Looks like most of you have answered. I'll give you another 15 seconds. Actually. Another 5 seconds while I just set something up here. Good. Okay, that's good. I will end the poll, and the large majority got this right. Not surprisingly, since we just talked about it, the correct answer is for both A and B. It's clarity, intimacy. No one chose histocompatibility. I'm glad, because I realized that is not a term you're going to learn until you learn about smell. So that's why it's a distractor item on this, because I want to make sure that you can differentiate the terms that have to do with smell from those that have to do with sound. But it is absolutely both clarity and intimacy, as we just said. Okay, hopefully that was straightforward, and we can now go into our next lecture. Looks like there's one question I can just go ahead and see what that question is. Always exam questions. You probably know that. Most of you know that. No, but yes, every single question I am giving you are going to be on the exam. Okay, great. Let me just switch the slides here, and we'll be ready to go. Oopsie. All right, hold on just a second. All right, great. So we are moving from sound reflections to sound sources. All right. And we are going to start off by talking about something I think you'll find really fun and interesting. We're going to be talking about auditory approach. And what I mean by auditory approach is the idea that our brains seem very well suited, maybe in some ways especially designed to do a great job with hearing sounds that are approaching us. Okay, and now we're talking about sounds that are being made, not sound reflections. So we don't have to worry about that anymore right now. Instead, imagine just something as simple as a car coming towards you at night when you maybe at first can't see its direction. You're very good at doing something like that. If you have to maybe move to an alarm clock or something like that at night, your brain really makes it relatively easy for you to go towards that sound source. And we'll talk about other examples of this, but I want to introduce this whole thing to you by talking about something I think you're going to find absolutely amazing. And that is a sport called beep baseball. So what is beep baseball? Beep baseball is a sport that is played by blind people. It is kind of like softball, very much like softball, but it's called beep baseball because of the nature of the ball. And I actually have one right here. This is a beep baseball. And, maybe not surprisingly, beeps. And it's the job of the batter to be able to hit the ball. But as you'll see, especially the catcher, or I'm sorry, not the catcher, the people out in the field to grab the ball. The way it works is this. Let me tell you a little bit about beep baseball, and then I'll show you a little video just to give you a sense. Well, let me show you the video now. I'll show you the video now so you get an idea of what the sport is like. And hopefully I know this is going to come through kind of staggered visually, but at least auditorily you'll get a sense of what it's like. And worst comes to worst, I can always post it on our YouTube site. Oh, crap. Oh, boy. Okay, hold on, everything. No one panic. I'm going to make sure the sound is on. I have no idea why this is not working. It is a really nice demonstration. I don't know why that's not working. I don't know why you would not be hearing that. Let's see if this helps. Let me see if this helps. Sorry about this. The Zoom is acting weirder since I updated it. Let's see if you can hear this now. No. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? All right, let me just try it one more time. Sorry about this. I don't know why this is having a problem this time. Why is that not working? That is so strange. Okay, if this one doesn't work, what I will do is I will just narrate it. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. I'm seeing lots of chats beeping. You can hear it, the volume's just low? Interesting. Okay, let me try that. I can't hear it at all over here. Let's try it one more time. The sound is up all the way as far as I can tell. Okay. You see that everyone has a blindfold on. They hit the ball and then they run to one of two bases that are placed at the first base and third base positions of a normal ball game. And the catcher, or I'm sorry, the outfielders are also completely blind, but some have light vision. So everybody wears a blindfold. Let me just show it to you one more time. And again, I apologize for the sound. Okay. The batter's blindfolded. He's hearing the beeping ball. He hits the ball and then runs to the base. The base is making a sound. It's going like that. While he's doing that, the outfielders are trying to stop the beep baseball. And when they're able to grab it and hold it up in the air, that means that the runner has to stop. That means that they don't make it all the way. Okay, I apologize for this. Were you guys able to hear it at all? I heard it. I can hear the sound. Oh, if you can hear the sound, I shouldn't be talking it. All right, let me play it one more time. I have no idea why this isn't working. I'll play it one more time, and I'll be quiet so you can hear it.
You can imagine running full speed in the darkness 100 feet toward a buzzing target. It's at first, if you're doing it for the first time, there's a lot of fear involved. Willing to sacrifice your body and potentially get hit with a lot, with a ball that's coming at you at a decent speed.
Great. Okay, so I guess it probably will be on the video, which is nice to know. I can't hear a thing. I've seen it before, though, so I know what it's all about. And again, let me talk about the rules. So the pitcher is actually on the same team as the batter, as is the catcher. So remember, if you played Little League when you were a kid, you had maybe a year where your coach would pitch you the ball and try to put it in a position where you could hit it. That is exactly what the pitcher in beep baseball does. They try to throw the ball so the batter can hit it. And in fact, what they do is they practice for hours and hours and hours. And the pitcher typically has something like some sort of, thing to kind of say, like ready, set, go. And when they say go, the batter will know that the pitcher just released the ball. And the pitchers have to be these great athletes. They're sighted, by the way. The pitcher and the catcher are sighted. The pitchers have to know how to throw it differently for every batter, because every batter is going to have somewhat different preferences in where they want the ball to be thrown, how hard they want it to be thrown. So these pitchers, which are typically, like a sibling of one of the blind players, have to be these great athletes. And then the blind players themselves are great athletes too. They take this very, very seriously. They train for months and months. And I was able to go to the Beat Baseball World Series and see it. It's a great time. Don't get me wrong. All the families are there and they're having picnics and it's really fun. But they take it so seriously. It's really exciting to see. Let me tell you a little bit more about it. It was invented in 1964. It was invented at a school for the blind at first, and they played just within the school, and then other schools for the blind started having teams, and now I don't know what it is right now, but in 2010 it was 16 teams in the U.S. and then a number of teams in Japan. It's become a very popular sport with the blind community in Japan as well, which is really interesting. Something really interesting is, the range of players on the teams. You saw some, teenagers. I think you had to be 15 or 16. But then there were guys who were, and gals that were playing, well into their 50s. And yeah, so they weren't as fast as they used to be, but they could hit great. And, they were great outfielders and all that. So yeah, it was really, really impressive. As I said, the rules are a little different. The batter, after they hit the ball, has to run to one of two bases. So it's either, there's a base, that big foam thing you're seeing here, the foam thing you're seeing here is the base. It looks like that would be in like third base position on a regular, baseball diamond. And the other base would be in about first base position on a diamond. And after they hit the ball, they don't know which one to run to until one of the umpires flips a switch, and that switch randomly either turns on the sound of the third base or it turns on the sound of the first base. So they hit it, and they don't know which direction they're running in, but they then, as soon as it's hit, the sound comes on, and it sounds different. It sounds different. I know I just got a little internet issue there. It sounds not like a beep, 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 beep. It sounds like like that. So it's a very distinct sound from the beep. Both sounds are happening at the same time. Hopefully the movie showed you that. So they need to run as fast as they can to the base that's making that buzzing sound. And as that's occurring, the ball is rolling out to the outfielders, and the outfielder's job is to grab the ball and say, basically say, I have it, and put it in the air to show everybody they have it. And whatever happens first, if the runner gets to the base, okay, they score a point. If the outfielder gets the ball before the runner gets there, then the batter is out and doesn't score. So it's basically a race between the outfielder and the batter runner as they're going to the base. Okay, so that's how it works. And you can imagine the scores are often very, very high. Like if you watched the Dodger game last night, 15 to something, right? That because the pitcher is on the batter's team and trying to get the batter to hit the ball, then in fact the batting averages are very high. Most time I would say that the ball is hit for each batter more than 50% of the time. So they're generally successful. And as I said, it's because the pitcher and catcher are on the same team as the batter. They are sighted. They are some of the few. There's umpires that are sighted all over the place. Watching to make sure to see who gets whether the ball is stopped first or whether the batter gets to the base. But the only players that are sighted are the batter and the pitcher, who are on the same team as the pitcher and the catcher are sighted. The batter is not sighted, but the batter's on the same team as the pitcher and the catcher, right? So this is kind of important. I had always assumed that the batter was in fact using the beep, and the batters will say they do use the beep to hit the ball, but more than that, they say they really are listening to the coordination with the pitcher. So when the pitcher says ready, set, go, they know that the pitcher's then releasing the ball. Hopefully the ball's coming exactly where they want to do it. So they will listen to the beep, but that's not where sound is actually. The beep is most important. Really what they're doing there is they're practicing for days and days and days to have a really good rhythmic coordination between the pitcher throwing the ball and the batter then starting the swing. Okay, so that does have to do with sound, but it has, I think, more to do with rhythmic coordination. And in fact, what the batters will say, a lot of times we will practice our batting with balls that are broken and don't make a sound anymore, because it sometimes helps really them to concentrate on the coordination, right? But where the sound is really important, and I think will be most instructive for what we're going to be learning, is in the fielding and running, okay? So think about this. You're in the field, and here comes the beeping ball, right? And it's a heavy ball. It's generally going to be rolling to people along the ground, and so their job for most hits is to jump on the ground and stop the ball and then grab it. Okay, so the diving onto the ground is something that has to be done with a lot of precision. So they have to dive onto the ground and stop the ball. Okay, now here's the thing. This is what makes it challenging, and this is why it takes so much practice for these folks. Because if the ball's kind of bounding out, you got to dive and stop it, but you've got to be able to know where the ball is going to be. In other words, you can't just start diving as soon as you hear the ball being hit, right? If the ball's hit and you get a sense it's coming towards you and you don't know which side to dive on, okay, you're going to miss the ball, right? So you have to dive after you have some information for this auditory approach, right? So I know I've got to dive in this direction and not that direction. The other thing, though, of course, is that you can't do it too late, because if you're listening for the ball to get very close to you before you do your diving, the ball's going to go right past you, and someone's going to score a run. So their job, the fielder's job, is to really precisely listen to the approaching sound and dive in such a way that it's not too early so they don't know what side the ball's going to be coming towards them on, and it's not too late so it passes them and the runner's going to score a point. So that's what you see. You see them really being very, very kind of intent in listening to the ball and then, diving in the right direction, and they generally get it. I should say something else very quickly. I hear this happens usually at least once a game. I saw it happen. Not all the balls are going to be going on the ground. Sometime, of course, the batter's going to hit the ball and it's going to be going up. And I did see a blind person catch a fly ball that was coming towards them. And when it happens, people go nuts. It's usually just once a game. It's a hard thing to do. These are balls coming fast and they're heavy, but they can put their gloves up, and if they don't catch it, they very often can stop it and knock it down. That's kind of, unless you're sure you can catch it, they tell you to knock it down and then grab it. But I did see somebody catch it, and it was like people just on both teams cheered. It was really exciting. Okay, so that's the first place where approaching sound is very important. The second place it's very important is actually in base running, and it's going to be for a different sound this time. It's the buzzing sound, right? First, we know it's not the beeping sound, it's a buzzing sound. The runner's already hit the ball, so they don't care about the beep at this point. They're running towards the buzz. Now, in order to most likely hit the base, what they are taught to do is at the very last second to kind of throw their arms out like this, right? So here I am, I'm running. In order to increase the chances I'm going to hit the base, right? Even though I'm running right towards it, they throw out their arms, and it makes it much easier, right? Because if they're just off to the side a little bit, they'll still hit the base if their arms are like this. But here's the problem. They can't run like this, right? If you're trying to run fast, this is not going to help. If you're a runner, that pumping your arms really helps you go faster. So they're kind of set with the same situation with their arm extension as they're running to the base. They've got to make sure that they don't run a majority of the path with their arms out like this, right? Because they won't run fast, and it's very unlikely if they do that they'll be able to get to the base before the fielder gets the ball. Instead, what they'll do is they'll try to pump for most of their path. But at the very last second, they have to open up their arms to make sure they hit the base. So they, like the outfielders, have to listen and be very precise about perceiving the auditory approach. Okay, there's the title of the slide again, right? In the fielder's case, it's a sound source, something making a sound approaching them. In the batter and runner's case, it's them approaching a sound source, right? Because they're running towards where the sound is coming from, right? But it's the same thing. Their brains are kind of trying to precisely control their action, their behavior, whether it's falling to the ground, jumping onto the ground, or opening the arms at the very last minute, based on hearing the sound coming closer and closer and closer. Okay, and so what we're really talking about here is something called auditory anticipation. And as you're going to see, as I mentioned earlier, it is something that our brains seem to be nicely tuned to, right? And yes, certainly these folks are amazing. That they've been playing for years. I talked to one guy who had been playing for 30 years or something like that, and he says that he doesn't really have to train for that type of thing anymore. He just has to make sure he's still in shape. But he said, yeah, at the beginning, it's really, really hard. We have to be very patient with new people on the teams because they have to, learn to fall to the ground or jump to the ground at just the right time, or to, open their arms at just the right time. It's really, really interesting. But in both cases, what we're talking about is being able to anticipate when they will be at the same place as a sound source. For the fielder. They need to, kind of intersect the sound source as it's coming to them. So they're anticipating through sound where the ball is going to be. And for the runner, they're anticipating through sound when they're going to be at the same position as the sound. So that's what's meant here by auditory anticipation. And we'll talk more about this, but let me take a little break and see if people have questions about beat baseball. I think, for some of you that have played baseball or softball, you might be really interested in this sort of thing. So let's see if we have questions about that. Okay, I'm glad you guys could hear the movie. Okay. Do people often collide with each other? That is such a good question, Ariel. Yeah, no, they don't, and I'll tell you why. I might have mentioned this in the book. I didn't mention it today, but there is constant chatter out in the outfield, right? So someone says, I think it's coming towards me, I'm jumping. It's me, it's me, it's me. And they'll kind of always tell each other where they are. And even while, the ball's being pitched, they'll say, hey, where are you, Dave? Where are you, Dave? I'm right here. And they won't, say, oh yeah, it sounds like you're 5 feet or something like that. But just by hearing other people's voices, they know how close or far or where they are relative to them in the close to the batter and stuff like that. Miraculously, they rarely bump into each other. I didn't see anything like that happen at all because they're constantly talking, especially on the outfield. Great question. Let's see what else. Is the game silent played? The people who are watching, are they told to be silent? Great question. During the actual pitching and fielding, people are quiet. As soon as one thing happens, whether the fielder gets the ball or the runner makes it to the base, people go nuts like it's a regular baseball game. And then I think I put this in the book, if I remember correctly. At one point, they stopped playing. Somebody yelled, "Okay, hold up, everybody, plane!" And there was a very loud plane overhead over the field, and I guess that meant that they, the plane was kind of masking a lot of the sound of the base of the ball, or probably even more so the sound of people talking to each other, so they wouldn't bump into each other. But it was kind of interesting because at least when I was a kid and I used to play in the street, play stickball in the street or whatever, we'd say, hey, here's a car, we got to stop and go to the side of the street. But when you're playing beat baseball, you don't stop for cars that might be coming your way. You have to stop because there's this sound overhead, which I thought was interesting. It was really fun and really fascinating. If they hear the audience, does it affect them reaching the base? These guys practice so much. I didn't hear a lot of cheering during the base running, but I think they practice so much that they probably to some degree can block that type of sound out. Whether they could block out the sound of a plane, probably not, because in this case it was very loud. If there was a blind pitcher, could they be accurate to hit an object making sound? Good question. I did not see any blind pitchers playing. There's no part of the game that involves a blind player actually throwing the ball in any direction. It's just hitting the ball and then fielding the ball. I don't know about if people have tried, the blind athletes have tried to throw the ball towards a sound, like, let's see if you can hit the base, and they turn on the base, maybe during practice, and throw it to the base. I mean, maybe. It's a good question. It's a good question. Thank you, Daniel. And any other questions about blind baseball? Any other questions? Okay. Then let's continue. We'll do a question in just a second. Let's continue talking about this. So now we're going to branch out from beat baseball. While I'm remembering this, I did post a video that does a really nice job of talking about the sport, and it does some great interviews and stuff. I think it's different from the video that you just saw, but it is listed along with all the YouTube, on the YouTube channel with all the lecture videos, which, by the way, I have now made accessible to everybody in the world, because I understand there was some people were having trouble accessing the videos for some reason, and it was because I believe I made them unlisted but gave you the link, but some people had trouble using the link. So now they are accessible to everybody in the world. Hopefully we won't get some really mean comments, and if I do, I'll take out the comments or something like that. Anyway, should be easier now. Oh, one more question very quickly. Is there stealing bases? No, because there's just running to the one base, whether it's to the one on the right at first base position or one to the left on the second base position. But you know, again, it sounds like a much easier sport in some ways, but don't forget, these people are not using vision whatsoever. By the way, the reason why they use blindfolds, all the players that are, you know, except for the catcher and the pitcher, all the players are wearing blindfolds. And the reason for that is that some blind people, in fact, a lot of blind people are legally blind but have some light vision. And that can give an advantage, especially like if you're running to a base and you're able to see shadows and things like that. That would be a visual advantage. So it kind of equalizes the players so they're all dependent on using sound. Okay, thanks for all the great questions. That's really interesting. Okay, so let's talk a little. Oh yeah, hey, guess what this is? It's not beep tennis, it's rattle tennis. Now, I can't hear this, but these are two blind players who are playing tennis as they listen to a tennis ball that's been filled with like little BBs, little, you know, what we used to call shot, tiny little balls. Maybe you can hear this. I can't, but it sounds like a rattling ball as it bounces. And that's how they're able to play. They are completely blind. You can see the rules are a little different. It bounces, they get two bounces rather than one. The court's smaller, the net's a little bit lower, but it's just amazing. There are you know, tournaments for this, like the baseball tournaments. Okay, sorry about that. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the kind of big picture here. And this is what I'm most interested in you learning about, is this idea of auditory approach and how our brains seem to be really sensitive to this sort of information. So what this is called sometimes is time to arrival. And what this means is that basically whether you're the runner running towards the buzzing base or the fielder that has to time their jump to the ground as the beeping ball is coming towards them, in both cases, the athletes need to judge when they will be at a position or when the ball will be at their position. So it's like somehow the brain is calculating, when will the sound be at my position? Okay, when will it be at my position? So this is like anticipating its approach, or your approach towards the sound source, as I said. Okay, and how are they able to do this? Well, let's first look at the kind of acoustics. Remember, we did this when we were discussing echolocation. We looked at the sort of sound structure that might allow this sort of thing. So what are the acoustic cues? What are the sound cues that allow the brain to make these sorts of judgments? And I'm just going to go through these kind of quickly. You know, they're a little technical, but I think I just want to make them intuitive. I'll list them first, and then we'll talk about them. Okay. So you can see it says intensity, complexity, Doppler shift, intraoral, and reflectances. So I'm going to try to make this each one as intuitive as possible. Intensity is really just loudness. So you know this. As a sound source gets closer to you, it gets louder, right? That's something you know very, very well, okay? And that's what this little graph is showing right here. The sound source is getting closer. Sound source approaches, says here. And the amplitude, which in this case is intensity, I should say, just in case you're a little confused, which is actually the acoustic name for it. For us, we would say it's louder. Okay, so you know, for our purposes, intensity and amplitude are, you know, part of the signal which we perceive as loudness. It sounds louder as it gets closer, and then as it goes past us, if you're you know, an unfortunate fielder who didn't jump fast enough and the ball went past you, it's going to get quieter as it rolls past you, and hopefully the next fielder will get it or whatever. Okay, that's intuitive. I think we know that as a sound source gets closer to us, as somebody is talking to us and they get closer to us, they get louder. But what's really interesting about that cue is the rate at which it gets louder. So it's not like, this is showing a sound source like a beeping ball, or you know, you running towards the base at a constant velocity. It's not that it gets kind of consistently louder. Instead, it gets kind of louder slowly at first. And then as it gets closer and closer to you, its kind of loudness increases exponentially. And that's an important fact. Okay, so what I'm saying here is imagine the ball's coming at you at a constant velocity. Okay, it's coming at you at a constant velocity like this. Even though the ball's coming at you at a constant velocity, the sound will increase slowly at first, but then when it's really, really close, the sound's going to get louder really, really fast. And that's what this is showing here. That's just showing that it kind of gets exponentially loud the closer it gets. Exponential just meaning it's a curve, it's not a straight line. Okay, that's an important thing to know because every other cue we're going to be talking about does the same thing. That it changes slowly at first, but then as it gets closer and closer, it gets louder, faster and faster. It changes much more dramatically. So for example, complexity. Complexity is just kind of the fancy acoustic word, one of the fancy acoustic words, for what you would experience as something like, I don't know, how trebly it sounds or how maybe clear it sounds. I can use that term too. And I think that the example to give you is this. If you've ever been like waiting in an intersection and someone behind you that's kind of driving to stop at the intersection too and is way back, they have a great sound system in the car and you can hear that boom, 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 if listening to hip hop or something like that, you can hear the bass really far away. Say, I can tell that somebody's got one of these great sound systems, but I'm not sure what music they're listening to. And then they get a little closer and you can say, oh, sorry. I don't know if that was me making sound or you. Hopefully you're okay. I jumped. As the car comes close, you can say, oh, I can hear the bass part now. And I can make it out. What's my son listening to right now? What's his name? Bad Bunny. There you go. Isn't it funny when old guys say that, say a kind of hip new artist, Bad Bunny. Yeah, you got to like the bunny. Anyway, so here comes the guy listening to Bad Bunny in his car, and now you can hear the bass part and say, oh yeah, I think it's that Bad Bunny song, but I'm not sure. And then the car comes right next to you, and yes, the bass and the bass drum are very, very loud, but you can hear a little bit of the vocals, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that not only is it going to get louder as it gets closer, it's going to get a little bit clearer. You're going to be able to hear things more vividly as it gets closer. And that's true of all sound. And in fact, when you're running towards that bass, at first it's not only going to sound quieter, but it's also going to sound a little muddier, a little kind of more bassy, so that but then when you get closer and closer to it, it's going to sound a little bit more clear, a little bit more vivid, just like the Bad Bunny song, right? Until when you're right there on top of it, it's going to sound kind of really like a very clear buzz. And that's what complexity is about. Doppler shift, I'm not going to go too far into, but you actually know what it is. Maybe you've heard Doppler shift radar when it comes to weather. That has to do with a different type of radar, but the same principle. This is what the Doppler shift sounds like. I'll first sing it for you, and then I will describe why it occurs. So imagine you're standing, we don't hear trains a lot in Southern California. Instead, it's a motorcycle. You're standing on the side of the road and you hear motorcycles coming. It might sound like this as it comes towards you and then passes you. Okay, that was good. Thank you very much. That drop in pitch is a function of the acoustic signal. Okay, so it's coming towards me. Like that. And the reason that occurs, and it's shown right here in this image right here, as it's coming towards you, it kind of bunches up the waves, so they're kind of compressed, which actually gives it a higher sounding pitch sound. And then when it's right in front of you, you're hearing the pitch as it really is. And then when it goes away, that pitch decreases just a tiny bit as the waves kind of expand. Okay, so that picture right there is showing you the Doppler shift. That is portraying the Doppler shift. I don't care if you exactly know the physical principles behind it. For some of you, you might be interested, but that is the cue that you hear when a train passes by or an ambulance siren. Right? You've heard that type of ambulance as it's passing by you, maybe. That is the Doppler shift. And that's another way that the brain can use sound to know that something is approaching, okay? To know that a sound source is approaching us, or in fact, we are approaching a sound source, okay? What else? Interaural is what happens as a function of having two ears. Okay, we have an ear on the right side and an ear on the left side. If you remember from last discussion section, they talked about this in the context of binaural hearing, as we did a tiny bit too. And the idea is just this. If a sound source, here's our beeping ball again, passing me this way, okay? At first, when it's coming towards me, it's hitting my right ear before my left ear. And in fact, it's a little bit louder in my right ear than my left ear. But then as the ball continues to go past me, that difference in the sound going to the two ears actually shrinks until when the ball's right in front of me and making the beep sound, both ears get the sound in the same way. As the ball then continues and goes past me, now my left ear is getting the sound a little sooner than my right ear, and it's getting it a little bit louder than my right ear. It seems like a teeny little difference, but boy, is your brain really good at using that difference in how the two ears are getting the two sounds to allow you to determine that a sound source is approaching us or we're approaching a sound source. Reflectances refer to what happens when a sound gets towards you and you hear more of the original sound and less reflectances. Let me try to make this really intuitive for you, okay? If in fact we were in a giant warehouse, okay, a giant warehouse or an airplane hangar or something like that, and I clap my hands, right? You would hear a lot of kind of echo. In fact, you might hear more echo than you would hear actual direct hand clap, right? In fact, that's what this is showing here. That somebody's playing guitar and the sound, as you know from reflected sound discussions, bounces all the way around the room, okay? So if my hand clap is really far from your ears, I'm on one side of the airplane hangar, you're on the other side of the airplane hangar, you're going to hear a lot of these echoes. But then as I get closer and closer to you, you'll still hear some echoes, but the sound coming from directly my hands to your ears is going to be more pronounced. You're going to get more direct sound than you're going to get reflected sound, okay? And it's something you would probably even notice, if I pointed that out to you, which is interesting. That difference between how much direct sound you're getting from my clapping versus the reflected sound you're getting from the warehouse, that changes as I get closer, and that change tells you something about my approach, okay? So those are all cues the brain uses to tell that a sound source is coming towards us, like the beeping ball, or I am coming to a sound source like the bass that I'm running to if I've just hit the ball. The other thing I wanted to remind you of is this thing. In all of these cases, whether it is the amplitude/intensity, whether it is the complexity I'm talking about, or the Doppler shift or the interaural reflectances, it's not a straight line as a sound source gets closer to you. Instead, those changes start slowly at first and get faster and faster as it comes close to you. Again, the object is going at a constant velocity. It's not getting faster as it's getting closer, but the sound change is happening faster as it's getting closer. It's what we say the rate of change. And it's what the brain listens to, right? So imagine here, oh boy, this is okay. I will have time for this. The fielder has to listen to know when it's time to jump and stop the ball, right? And what they could do is say, listen, as one example, their brains could listen to how loud it is and know that as it gets louder really fast, it's time to jump. So they could listen to the ball coming to them. Of course, everything's going to be in slow motion here, but they could listen and say, nope, not time to jump yet, not time to jump. It's kind of changing slowly. It's getting louder, slower. Okay, but then all of a sudden it's getting louder and it's getting fast. The loudness change is getting faster and faster. And that's how they could time their jump. That's how the runner going to the buzzing base could know when it's time to pull out their arms. They're listening to that kind of quickly changing slope to make their judgments. What else do we know about this? Okay, we know when it comes to this type of accuracy, okay, people can do this really, really well. And there's been lots of, we did some experiments many years ago where people had to judge when they thought a car sound that was recorded for them would be at their position just by listening to the first part of the car coming towards them or just the second part of the recording. They could judge when the car would have arrived at their position. So again, this is the idea of judging auditory approach, you know. And something I can tell you right now is that, not surprisingly, the blind are better than the sighted at this, right? Blind are more accurate. Even if they don't play beep baseball, they are more accurate at judging when they would be at the same location as a sound, whether the sound is coming towards them or they're going towards the sound. But the other thing I wanted to mention about all this is that when people make mistakes, and for the blind, they're subtle mistakes, the mistakes are always in the same direction. Everyone always over-anticipates. It's something that so what I mean by over-anticipates is that if you're hearing something come towards you and all of a sudden the sound stops and you're asked to push a button when it would be passing you if you could still hear it, you would push the button too soon, okay? Everyone does that. In fact, the blind baseball players have to learn to kind of offset that to some degree, because it's a tendency for our behavior to, if anything, make mistakes that over-anticipate, and I think that's a good thing. It's safe, right? If anything, if you're going to make a mistake, you want to think that you're going to be at the sound source, or the sound source is going to be at you sooner, just in case you have to get out of the way of something, okay? Again, the blind are better than the sighted at this. Okay, let me take some questions, and we'll do one more polling question. What do we got here? Bad Bunny is real, right? I said the right thing, Bad Bunny. Everyone's laughing at Bad Bunny. Okay. Okay, so intensity, again, is just the idea that sound gets closer to you, gets louder, right? Sabrina says Bad Bunny is lit. Don't you hate it when old guys do that? Okay. Complexity, again, think of the car approaching you, and not only does sound get louder, it gets clearer. You know now that it's a real Bad Bunny song because you can hear Bad Bunny's lit rapping. Woo! All right, let me give you one question really quickly. How are we doing here? Oh, shoot. Okay, it's going to be very quick. Shoot. You know what I'm going to do? Yeah, I don't have enough time. I know some of you might have things to do. I will promise I will give you a question the first thing next class that you'll be able to put in your, you'll be able to have so we can do well on the test. Okay, sorry about that, but you'll definitely get it next time. So have a good weekend, and I will see everybody next week. Bye-bye.